Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I saw this on Facebook, or one of my viewers sent me this on Facebook, and then another viewer sent it to me on Instagram this morning. It's a TikTok video of JoJo getting handsy with what appears to be, I think, his grandson. I don't know. And so I was thinking about this because, there's the obvious takes that people are going to have on this, but let's just show it. So JoJo touches his head and then grabs the kid's face and kisses him in a very sort of, the way he's holding his hand over the kid's mouth is very odd. And then the way he's kissing him in a very forceful, almost like I dominate you type of a way, right? And there's going to be lots of speculation about, it's just very disturbing, in terms of the way that he's touching him and handling him. And I know the people on the right and people in the truth community are going to have their opinions about how creepy JoJo is and what, all the stuff he's done before, the way he touches people. And it used to be that, there was a hit piece that CNN has done, and I covered this in so many videos, I'm not going to do it here, about him snoozling and sniffing and groping and doing all those things that he does. CNN used to criticize him for this in 2015 when he was going to run for president, right? And so did Jon Stewart and David Letterman and Hollywood personalities and people. But then all of a sudden this became okay because of their hatred of Trump. Nobody really liked this guy. The Democrats didn't really like him. He was, the vice president is often a joke, and he was the ultimate sort of joke to Barack Obama. He was a punchline, a walking gaffe, and they all knew it. But then all of a sudden, this behavior became acceptable. And so in terms of this video, the point is that people on the left, and you can also think about this in terms of people on the right, will rearrange their standards, right? This is human behavior. They'll rearrange their standards and embrace somebody or something or some sort of behavior because of their, being in one group or another, right? Think about, what we're watching here. If that was Donald Trump, what would the left and what would the left media and what would the celebrities be saying if this was Donald Trump, right? I'm just talking about the behavior. You could just CGI JoJo out and put any number of person in there. They could do a deep fake and just change JoJo into Trump or, Ted Cruz or any number of people, right? And based on who it is, they would change what they're seeing. They would change the opinion of what they're seeing. And this goes for the right as well. Because if Donald Trump was doing this, this would be okay for people on the right. They would just make it okay. But it's creepy behavior no matter what, right? And you can say, all right, this is, just the tip of the iceberg and, whatever it is with JoJo. But it is something where the behavior itself, what you're seeing, makes you uncomfortable. The way he's touching the kids, and he touches the kid's head, and then the grabbing of the face and pulling him close to him and having his hand over his mouth and forcefully kissing him. He's not asking the kid's permission. If you've ever been a kid and one of your relatives, you might have a, crazy aunt or somebody, and they come and they get aggressive with you and you don't even know who it is. They've seen you be born, you're some relative that you had and they're getting all glommy all over you and you don't know who they are. I've seen this, with my own kids when I brought them to the supermarket when they were babies, and people would come up and want to touch them and stuff, right? Strangers. I'm like, I don't know you, right? They just think that they can get handsy with kids because kids are innocent and they don't know how to interpret what's going on, right? People's treatment of kids is different than their treatment of adults, right? Someone wouldn't come up to, JoJo does this with adults, which is even more effed up, right? But touching people without their permission in this kind of a way, and, I'm sensitive to this because, I have body space issues and, I don't, there's one viewer a long time ago wrote and said, if I saw you, I'd give you a big hug. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't. I wouldn't dig that. I don't know who you are, right? I'm very susceptible to being in crowds and having people close to me and things like that. And people who are like that, this is, even more disturbing when you see this kind of behavior, that people just come up and grab you and touch you without your permission. Like there isn't some, stated agreement that this is okay behavior. And people do that with kids more than any other group, especially babies, right? Babies are innocent and, people love babies, right? There's just naturally, when you see a baby, you're like, oh, wow, babies are great, right? But does the baby want your energy, or should you be, on top of the baby giving your energy? The baby has, their skull bones haven't completely formed and their spiritual chakras and things are all open. And so, just because you think the baby's so cute doesn't mean you can start glomming on it and stuff, right? Like it's still a living human being, or animals as well, right? You have to be somewhat respectful of things. You have to be respectful of other creatures, and they have their own autonomy and they're not digging you, right? So, you have to learn to approach things in a respectful way. And so, like, this is something where just JoJo's done this time and time again. It's an odd behavior, but they've turned JoJo into some sort of a hero, right? Like, if you look at how he's being covered by the left media and celebrities and, whatever, Trump haters, they've turned him into some kind of great president and a hero, and he's always been weird, creepy, and unlikable. He didn't even, place in these other times he ran for president. He ran for president 3 times, and each time before this one, and each time he wasn't even considered as a serious candidate. They didn't want him. The left didn't want him. The Democrats didn't want him. But now they've just ignored all these types of behaviors, and, they're embracing him like he was some kind of a great man. He's making big changes, and, in terms of his policies, which I covered yesterday. At the very least, he's, a very creepy person, right? I mean, you can see right here, creepy. How many times do you see the word creepy when it's associated with Joe Biden? And it's more than just this, right? It's all of his gaffes. It's, his yelling at people. It's, when he's talking to civil rights leaders that time, he was getting his finger out. He was mansplaining all these things. And so he's at the very least, this is not normal behavior. And so the second piece to this is, and I have a whole other, angle on all this stuff, but I want to cover it in this order. Republicans are crusading against woke. Yet lawmakers and operatives who spoke to NBC News varied in how they defined the idea, while others said they didn't know much about wokeness at all. And it says Republicans looking to dent President Joe Biden and win back the Congress next year, in part by rousing voting base animated by culture war issues, have increasingly settled on single word to describe what it is they stand against: woke. And so there was this, big conservative type of, whatever it was, convention thing, and they went after Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney, right? Liz Cheney was speaking out against Trump, even though, like I just documented in my video yesterday, that her father, who was, kind of the personification of evil, Dick Cheney, right? Who everybody hated, like on the left. Like the left hated Dick Cheney, but now they're embracing his daughter because she was anti-Trump. I mean, this is how, people change their opinions of things. But Dick Cheney is worth between $19 and $80 million because of those bogus illegal wars that we had that he was in charge of, like all the stuff that he orchestrated under his, shadow presidency. I mean, Dick Cheney, has done so many horrible things, and she's talking about Trump like he's, the devil, but when her dad's Dick Cheney. And they all hated him. Like everybody, I mean, they were just, they didn't like George W. Bush, but they hated Dick Cheney. But now, like, his family's okay. Same thing with Sidney McCain. Sidney McCain, and, she wasn't liked by the left. And there's Tucker Carlson for some reason. And so, and then she was on with Jake Tappas.
Our episode going on in your home state 6 months after the election, Republicans in Arizona doing something. It's just downright bizarre. They brought in a guy who's an election liar to lead an audit of ballots from Maricopa County. Even though the election board there is led by Republicans, they're using ultraviolet light and other methods to examine ballots, looking for evidence of voter fraud. Obviously the same lie that fueled the January 6th attack on the Capitol. What do you make of all this? Is the Arizona Republican Party undermining democracy?
First of all, what he did here is not what a newsman's supposed to do. Like, he just told the viewers what is happening not reporting objectively. You know, you understand this. Like, and Fox News started this. Like, Fox News was the worst a long time ago, and MSNBC and CNN saw that they were getting killed, so they adopted these tactics where you come out and you're not an objective news person. You tell the audience what's happening. You skew the story to your point of view, your network's point of view.
Oh, listen, the whole thing is ludicrous. Quite frankly, it's ludicrous. And this also comes from a state party in Arizona that refused to be audited themselves on votes that were cast within their own party communications. So, the election is over. Biden won. I know many of them don't like the outcome, but, elections have consequences. And so this does not surprise me. Things are just aloof and crazy out there right now with regards to the election.
Quite a contrast with how your late husband lost the election in 2008 when he, in his speech, told people to stand by.
So the McCains were never as popular with the Republican base, John McCain, with the fervent, what became Trump supporters. But she used to be a Republican, right? And they didn't like her so much, like the mainstream media. Do you understand this? They didn't, the mainstream media didn't like Cindy McCain and other people, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, all this stuff, like I said. And now they love them, right? They're giving them all these spots. She's parroting the talking points. Elections have consequences was a talking point that she just said herself. That was a talking point from Joe Biden and them, that elections have consequences. That's something that CNN was putting out there. These are agreed upon talking points. And so, it's funny how their opinion of behavior shift based in what the person is representing at the moment. And I'm going to get back to the idea of woke with Republicans in a moment. But there's this, and people in the truth community. But there is, a shifting of reality and your interpretation of behaviors. You understand this? The behavior stays the same, whether it's people that you agree with doing it or whether it's people that you hate or disagree with doing it. You understand this? It's about behavior. You're against a behavior. Are you against the behavior or are you against the person, right? Are you against the ideology behind the behavior? The behavior is okay when your group does it, but the behavior is a horrible behavior when your enemies are doing it. You understand this? Like, it's okay for your team or your side to do the behavior, but it's bad for the other side to do the behavior. You remember when Omarosa and Michael Cohen turned on Trump? Remember? Omarosa was hated by the left. Like, when she was on The Apprentice, she was a villain, this character on multiple seasons of The Apprentice, and then she became part of Trump's cabinet, and they slammed her. She was one of those people like AOC is, right? That is a target for the left, right? She was a target for the media. And then she turned on Trump and they loved her. Then all of a sudden she was a reliable source. Michael Cohen was this scummy lawyer fixer for Trump. But then he turned on Trump and he was put out there in front of the Congress, the Senate, like he has something to say. All of a sudden we believe this guy because he turned on Trump. I mean, I just saw Rose McGowan was on Fox News. Rose McGowan, who's been, crazy, like somebody that the left and the truth community, the right and the truth community was against, right? I mean, she was somebody they were hammering all the time. But then she comes out and says the Democratic Party is a cult and she's criticizing Biden. And now she's on Fox News because, it's subjective towards an opinion, right? This subjectivity where all of a sudden somebody that, the behaviors you were criticizing before and everything the person represents, but then they agree with you and then you turn everything around, right? As soon as they, agree with something that you agree with and they're using you as a way to attack the opposition. So it's not the behavior you're against, it's the ideology, right? It's the, it's the subjective nature of reality, the subjectivity. And that subjectiveness is what's going to bring down humanity. Because if you want to extinguish behaviors, if you say behaviors are not okay, like certain behaviors should never be done, then that's, no matter who's doing it, you have to condemn. Like, you have to be butthurt over it all, right? You have to, whatever it is, right? I was just talking about this in my video on my other channel about, on apocalaughsnow, about Britney fans. That they want me to be sympathetic with Britney because she's been abused, but what about all these other celebrities that they hate, like Lady Gaga and, Cardi B and a number of other celebrities on the left that they don't mind me mocking or making jokes about because that's somebody that they hate. But Britney, no, not Britney. Britney, they have sympathy for Britney, And so if you're against a behavior, then it's everybody that does it. And you have to, be the same about it, or at least, have to have a similar level of outrage when people do it, right? You have to have the same similar, level of disgust no matter who's doing it. And that's just not the case in America anymore. It's so far skewed, the way that people condemn a behavior and then don't say anything when, like Trump was a big time friend of Jeffrey Epstein and even said that Jeffrey Epstein liked young girls. I mean, he said it in a quote, but that was like, oh, he's okay. Trump could never be bad, and so you're not condemning a behavior. That's going to bring down the system because, what happens is people have enough support. They have enough support behind them that they never get consequenced on their behaviors. I mean, that's what's happening right now. There's no consequences for behaviors because there's enough support on one side or another. And so the behaviors continue because people are embracing the behavior because they think that anybody on their side gets to do whatever they want because, the other side's so evil. Because people are going after other groups and not behaviors, not negative behaviors. It's the ultimate in terms of what the waking up process was supposed to be about, or what it used to be about, and what it is now. And it's a small shift with catastrophic implications, because when people used to use the phrase, "Oh, I've been awoken," someone woke me up. I woke up, and it's not really appropriate because it's not about being asleep. It's about being deceived, consciously being deceived. But the original idea of waking up included, essentially, this is an essential aspect to waking up, at least in this context, because there's deeper levels of waking up, right? But what it originally meant was you were aware that the system, the powers that be, both the left and the right, both the Democrats and the Republicans, both Fox News and any power organization, including your religion, because that's something that people, for people on the right, that's off the table. But everything that you were given as reality was given to you by a group of controlling people and their minions in an illusionary way to take you away from the truth, take you away from what life was about, that the system itself was a deception, right, on all levels. You got it in school, you got it on TV, you got it from the Democrats, you got it from the Republicans, that what you thought American life was and what being an American was and living in America and what America was itself, and again, across the globe, each country, the process is universal because it's a global, it's a global illusion. But in terms of being Americans, that everything was skewed in a way to take you away from your true purpose, take you away from the truth, and you were given this illusion. And at the center of this illusion was divide and conquer. Okay, and this is something even Alex Jones used to know when he had his, before Trump. I mean, Trump was when Alex Jones went far to the right. But before that, him and his show, used to talk about this, even though he was a fear-based person, which is something else I'll get into. I'll come back to the fear-based part. But the essential idea was that there is a divide and conquer aspect to the illusion. And that is you're either a left person or a right person, or breaking it up in demographics, racial demographics, or religious people against atheists, or whatever it might be, right? That you had these various groups, right? The divide and conquer mentality, where you were, placed in a group, or you placed yourself in one group or another, and you were focused on the other group, hating the other group, blaming the other group, at war with the other group. And that's how they controlled everybody, through divide and conquer. Divide and conquer is something that's been used. I mean, the British did it wonderfully, and they didn't invent it certainly, but it's what they did to keep their empire going, is find ways to divide people, and that takes them away from blaming you, from blaming the Queen and the empire, or in this case, the people who control the global economy and the American economy. They are never targeted, right? They were being targeted, they were being acknowledged, they were being viewed. When being awake meant you understood the left-right paradigm, that there wasn't a good side or a bad side politically or in any other way, right? That this, controlling group of people who, has levels of distraction. Hollywood is a level of distraction, and, Trump was a level of distraction, and Biden is a level of distraction, right? Or they're not even distraction, they're focal points, right? Where you'll focus your rage on Trump and Trump supporters, where you focus your rage on Biden and Biden supporters, where you focus your rage on Hollywood, or your disgust or your blame or whatever it is, right? You'll focus your negative energy towards those groups of people and not the puppet masters, not the people controlling the system. But even that, even understanding, focusing your ire on the people controlling the system is again the wrong idea, because that's another level, and I'll get into that in a moment. Like, let's cover the left-right stuff first. So when you think about waking up, like the Neo in the first Matrix movie, coming out of the pod where he was a battery, and now he is a conscious being, understanding or learning about the Matrix and the true essence of his existence, right? So when people started to wake up, they were, you went through a process, including a lot of emotions coming up. When you come out of this stupor that you are, believing in the system, and you're believing in the left-right paradigm, and you're just a cog in the wheel, then all of a sudden you start questioning everything. You're much more animated. And that's what waking up, you're much more alive. And people who are controlling the system saw this, right? They saw that these people were, they would post more things on social media, and they're much more passionate about it. They were more, activists. People who were waking up were more likely to become some sort of activists on social media and put information out there and be more convincing. And, their passion, oftentimes their sheeple family or whatever it might be, would be affected by them just to pacify the awoken person, right? Because people who don't care were less, all right, I'll just go along with you because I don't want to argue, even though that, this is how it really played out. That was kind of the thought about it. And they realized that this was a powerful way to actually, these activated people who were claiming to be awake, they needed to, again, divide this group into more liberal-oriented people who became woke, right, and who were triggered by Trump, and then the conservative awakened people who would become QBs and Trump supporters. And so now, instead of understanding that both groups were controlled and that there was, a group of like so-called elite, but, really was what I call the controllers that were, beyond those groups. They were the puppet masters, the people at the top of the capstone of the pyramid that was controlling the illusion, which was the essential understanding of being awakened. But now you had these two groups, and they were, equally delusional. They were, in a sense, worse than sheeple, because they were, deluded themselves that they were awake and they saw the truth, and they were passionate about it, arrogant about it, right? Violent about it in some cases. I mean, just nightmares of people, right? Just individuals and groups. And they were completely activated. They were completely, out there running around with their, chickens with their heads cut off, taking action on faulty information and a faulty reality. And so this way they divided what would become the truth community into these two groups of people who were clearly just sheeple, angry sheeple, right? They were sheeple who were made angry, and they were now still in this divided group of the left and the right, or whatever it is, right? And now there was all these other divided groups. There was a racial divide, and, we're on the cusp of a racial war, and all these things, the way people have been divided. And the Republican Party has been divided now between the Cindy McCains and the traditional Republicans, right? The Cheneys and the McCains and the Mitt Romneys and the Trumpers. And so you see even further division. So, you see that America has been splintered into all these groups and subcategories. And then you have people in the truth community who argue with each other all the time over, what your view of the illusion is, right? Over each specific issue. People are divided into groups, right? And they're just, very difficult to deal with, because they can't accept that you don't believe exactly what they believe on every controversial issue. So the division has gotten much, much worse. Where the central principle, the idea behind the truth community when it first originated, was that there was a small group of people that were manipulating everybody in a comprehensive way across everything in what I call the show, in terms of mainstream media and the celebrity culture and politics and sports and all these people who have, larger voices, successful people, air quotes, successful people in air quotes, famous people, people that have bigger platforms were, all a part of it, right? And so the rest of us, if there was enough movement and people woke up enough, we could say we demand that you stop playing us with your illusionary type of tactics and tell us the truth. And so this was supposed to be about a large group of everybody else going against the people who control the system, which is about 1 or 2% of the people. And that's failed dramatically. The leadership, the people that control the system, have now splintered the groups even more, have fractured and divided the groups even, into smaller groups, and it's more animated. The people are, more hateful and they're more angry, and so they've actually won this thing. In the so-called truth movement, the people who control the system have successfully won this thing. And there's lots of indicators. One of the first indicators, the way that you can tell they've won this thing, is because when there's any issue, whatever it is, the way that COVID is a great way to see it. That people's view on COVID and, what it is and the treatment of it and the medical aspect of it, masks and all these things, is completely subjective based in the group that you identify with. And so if you see that the group that you're oppositional towards is posting things on one side of the issue and your group is posting things on the other side of the issue, you just go on your side of the issue. It's like, when you're in a nasty breakup or whatever it is, divorce or something, and everything that person stands for, everything that other person, your ex, stands for and believes, you're immediately against, right? Just because, they're on that side of it. And that's what's happened here, like on a level where it isn't even about Trump and Biden anymore. It's about these groups of people, the masses, hating each other and taking oppositional opinions based in their negativity for the other group and their connection and their brainwashed aspect of being a part of the one group. And people say, well, the liberal groups are worse. Yeah, but have you ever talked to a QB? Have you ever dealt with a QB? Have you dealt with the really crazy Trumpers and things like this, the Trumpers that are in complete denial of what Trump really was? And so it's both sides have gotten really crazy, have gotten unhinged, and the focus has been completely taken off of the powers that be, the media and all the controlling aspects to it, right? It's more about individuals and, people in your life. So that becomes, people are getting divorced over their decisions or COVID decisions, right? I mean, things like this are happening where people are cutting off family members and friends and things like this because of the, division. It's even more divided now than ever. A good way to understand the division and the fail of the so-called truth community, the awakened and the woke, is that when I was making videos that were critical of Trump, so most of my videos were more critical of Biden because of, all the things that were going on his end and the way they had just propped him up and he didn't deserve to win the primary, like Bernie had more enthusiasm and the way the powers that be were pushing Biden, but Trump also had negatives. And even though I made all these negative videos about Biden, they were not negative, they were just truthful. But then when I criticized Trump and pointed some things out about Trump, people would write, well, what do you want, Biden? Or what do you want, Hillary? Right? This started, a couple years ago. Like you're stuck in a binary choice. And if I had Biden people show up here, which was very, seldomly, they would say, well, what do you want, Trump? Because in their mind, they had two choices. There's a binary aspect to the controlling system where you have to make a choice between two people, so you choose the lesser of two evils. And if you criticize one person, the other people are like, well, the other guy's worse. Well, why do I have to choose one of those? Why do I only have two choices? Two wrong choices. I mean, that's what the controlling system gives you. It gives you two wrong choices, and so you're constantly choosing the lesser of two evils. Whatever it is in your life, right? Work a slave job or starve. Wear a mask or don't go anywhere. These are the choices they give you. You choose the lesser of two evils. You do what you have to do to survive, constantly compromising your belief system, but you're only given these two choices. It's this or that, right? But there's infinite amount of choices and only one right one. There's only one divine choice. God, the path of divinity is always one. And finding that is the difficulty. But the people who control the system give you two choices, and one of them is slightly more appealing, so you take that one. And you can see the so-called truth community is so compromised because most people are still choosing between these two binary choices, thinking they only have one or two options, right? And so if you criticize the lesser of two options, right, the lesser of two evils, they go after you. Well, you want the more evil one then? No, I'm just not a binary person like you. I see that there's a bigger explanation. You've allowed them to put you in one or two categories, and so you're promoting half of their disinformation campaign because you think you only have the two options that they've given you. And so the central idea, which is obscurantism, which is the people that control the system, the people in the power. I mean, this is a word that's used in the heartfulness system all the time. In these whispers messages, obscurantism, where the people in power lie and deceive their charges, the people they're in charge of, give them, faulty information, give them illusionary information, and keep them from the truth and their true purpose and all these other things. I mean, it's, what the controllers have done in terms of guiding people in the wrong direction. And that's gone, right? That's completely, you can say, well, the right-wing people, the QBs and the, people in the truth community are always talking about the elite, right? But it's not a clear understanding of what I call the controllers. The elite is just some imaginary thing that they've made up. There's some truth in it, but most of it's disinformation. You look at, my wife showed me something the other day. We were talking about the, Jeffrey Epstein flight logs. And I'm like, those things are made up. Like, people just produce disinformation. I made this video on Britney Spears, and I included Lynn Wood, who is, the sort of QB evangelist now. And he said that Q was going to rebirth you into the spirit world. There's your Q, and he did the slash. He was, having his hand in a circle, that he did a slash. And I got a comment from a QB, there's just not many of them left, right? They've all but disappeared. And the person said, why didn't you play the whole clip? Because that's the only part I saw. Like, that was what was put up on Twitter or whatever it was. But the person said, why didn't you play the whole clip where he names names? And I said, well, naming names without evidence, that was the hallmark of the Q movement. People were naming names without substantial evidence or any evidence. And then, or they made up evidence and it got circulated around like it was truth. And that's not, that's bad behavior. That's not the way that you go about things. You don't put unsubstantiated accusations like they're fact. You have to say, this is speculation. I mean, I learned this, I don't know, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't know when it was. But I realized that I was reporting things and stating them like they were fact when they weren't. Like, I didn't know for sure they were fact. And even though I believed them, I had to make a distinction between speculation and fact, right? And that's something that everyone in the truth community needs to do. Anybody putting out information, whatever it is, If you're, thinking you're a journalist, and I wasn't even thinking I was a journalist, just, I have a comedy channel. I make fun of stuff. But I realized that I had to put things out like they were speculation, right? If I didn't know. And, and I didn't have slam dunk evidence. And even then, it's all, a crapshoot. But the problem with the left and right now, the awakened people, the cubies, and the woke people on the left, is they state things like they're facts, and they get, venomous about it. Anybody who confronts them on their faulty beliefs, and they're simply wrong. And so then there's another level to this, and that is this idea that the people so-called elite and the controllers control everything, which they don't. Like, they don't control things unless you let them, or they have, they're doing some work that divinity is allowing them to do, right? That it's somehow part of the divine plan. So there's a divine aspect to all of these things. There's a reason why these things are happening, as bringing out lower human behaviors and tendencies and allow human beings to just go in the wrong direction and hit rock bottom, so that people say, all right, we got to do better. Like everybody, on an individual basis, that you realize you have to do better. And that is, the reason why we're being allowed to sort of walk off the cliff and go into the abyss. The people who control the system control it because we all feed into it. We've all bought into there's good things about the system. Like, we all want to say how bad the elite are and the controllers and the debt-based economy, but we enjoy lots of material privileges, a lifestyle based in their work, their illusion, right? A lot of our physical comforts, all the stuff to do with technology, hot water that we have in our houses, just running water. There's people all over the world, and I think the average person walks 2.5 hours to get fresh water. You don't understand your privileges as a person in a developed country, especially people in America, but also, I guess, in Europe. But anybody in any country where you walk into the, bathroom and you flush your toilet with drinking water, right? Where people around the world are walking like 2.5 hours on average to get drinking water. And before that, everybody did that, right? Even kings and queens didn't have, water in their, in their bedrooms, right? Running tap water in their bedrooms, never mind a kitchen that had the kind of, technology we have, and clean water, because it's hard to keep water clean, right? It's hard to keep, water is a media for bacteria growth and all kinds of things, and it passes through whatever. You see that with some well water and some spring water, it's poisonous because it passes through one thing or another, and it retains some of it in it. And so fresh, clean water that is, that you're able to drink, and keeping it that way, have it pumped into your house, into your system, it's a wonderful thing. If you turn off your power, and I'm not telling anybody to do anything, but it's something where you turn off your power for like a week, and you don't have running water in your house, and just understand what that's like after a week. People experience this in New Orleans. My family and I, we were able to catch rainwater when we were in the flood. I just did a recent, video on apocalaughsnow channel with the flood in Brittany and all that stuff. And so, when you live without water, running water, fresh, clean water for any period of time, you go without electricity, you realize what a gift it is. You can't flush your toilets, you can't bathe, you have to, just you're thirsty or whatever it is. And so this gift of fresh water running to our houses is completely taken for granted. And there's all these other ways that our lives are made simple and easy, where our food is harvested. We've been growing food, and we have a huge thistle problem as a thistle weed. Anywhere that we uncover, we turn over the dirt, we plow the dirt and plow the grass under and turn it into a place to grow food. The thistle will outcompete whatever we're growing, and it's a pain in the ass to try to get it out of the ground. And so, you have these things that are done for you. People don't know. My family and I milked cow for 6 or 7 years, and I loved milking a cow, but it's also very difficult at times. And then processing the milk and making cheese, also very fun, but it takes a lot of time and effort. If I was, growing food full time, if my family was completely off the system, I would be able to make probably one video a week, without the system's help in terms of, giving to us everything that we have in our grocery stores and all these things. So there's wonderful things about the system, but people want to divide those things, right? Airplanes and being able to get into your car and just drive. I mean, think about when you first got a phone and GPS and you had to take a long trip and you just asked the phone to tell you where to go, as opposed to, I mean, think about, you older people, what it was like to look at a map and drive across the country and, all the things you had to do. You wanted to make a reservation, you had to pull over and find a payphone at a hotel, and you were hungry, you had to drive around, look for a restaurant. Like you didn't, now you can just search all those things on your, handheld computer. And like when you first got it, you're like, wow, this is amazing. Now, like there's your computer, your phone makes a mistake, and you're like, this thing sucks, right? Like how quickly you become entitled to something. You ever see that Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about, you're sitting up and you're sitting in a chair in the sky and you're complaining because the internet, you just found out in the beginning of the plane that you would have internet on the plane. He does a little bit on this thing, right? That people are ungrateful and become entitled to things. Like they've known about it one day and they already think they're entitled to it and complain about it when it doesn't work as well, right? But this is, all based in a system that is pleasure oriented, and it's made us have a lot of available free time, and we haven't used that free time to connect to God and, to better our relationships with our family and to become better people and work on our character qualities. We take that time that we have, that free time that we have, because before, when you had to survive on your own, when you were living in an agrarian lifestyle, you had to be working like 12 hours a day just to survive, right? Water and food and shelter and clothing, that you were constantly working, and then money became a thing, but you still had to work a lot to, survive. All these homesteaders, all these pioneers, these tribal people, it wasn't like they could just sit around all day and play video games and things. They didn't have that free time. But the way that we've used this free time to just indulge in things instead of better ourselves. But even now, people in the truth community, that you spend 6 to 8 hours a day looking at the information about things you have no control over and get upset about and just, don't do anything positive in your life. And there comes a point where you realize you have to change. It's you who has agreed to all these things, you who has indulged in the controller system. And you were pretty happy just to do it until you woke up, and then you're like, you still want all the things that the controller system gives to you. You want hot water, you want comforts, you want, to be able to set your car or your house to 70 degrees or 72 degrees and have it keep that climate constantly, ever-changing world where there's no consistency in that way, right? I mean, there's no constant temperature in nature. I mean, you have some of these tropical places that are, close to the ocean that keep a pretty constant temperature based in, being around a body of water. But even that is, there's a spectrum. There's a 20-degree swing between day and night. In the desert, it's even more severe, where you're suffering from heat exhaustion in the day and you're freezing at night in the desert. So, you have these climate control places, and people are living in places like the desert and living in other places that they really wouldn't be able to live in if it wasn't for the system, and how weak and dependent we are on the system, and how many things that we love about it are addicted to in the system. But we don't think about those things. We just think about the way the controllers have lied to us to keep us, pacified in this system, to keep the system going. And so, I talk about the controllers, but not with any hate and venom, because I wouldn't do their job. If someone said, hey, Paul, we want you to run the world, I'd be like, no, thanks. Because you're dealing with people. You would have to do similar things to what the controllers are doing just to keep people pacified, because people are nightmares. Everyone's a liar. It's not just the people who control the system that's a liar, right? People are lying and manipulating all the time. And so who wants to be in charge of that? Like, if you really thought about it, well, you'll have all the money in the world. Well, yeah, so what, right? Like, how much money do you need? And like the stress level, because, I would care more than them, right? Like, I would try to be a good leader, at least at first, more than the people who control the system. People say, hey, you want to be president? No, the president's a puppet position, but even if it wasn't, I have no interest in being in charge of people and dealing with all the problems that people have. And I know that if you came out as a leader and just told everybody the truth, that there'd be a small group that would accept it. I experienced it here on the YouTube channel. There are people who can understand, what I'm doing here, and they appreciate it even if they don't agree with everything. But it's not the majority. It's about 10% of the people that come through my channel, right? 10% of them stay. Like 10% of them have value in me telling them the truth or whatever, my perception of the truth is. And there's so many people over the years that like dig what I do here. They laugh at the jokes. They like what I say. And then I say one thing that they get butthurt about, and they haven't commented at all. They have just been sitting there lurking, enjoying the videos, which is totally fine. I don't, that's great, right? But then they don't say, oh, wow, these things are great, or they don't do anything. They don't share the stuff on their Facebook page. They don't tell other people about it because they're a little bit scared of, some of the things or the way I present things, or, just they don't want to be outed as truthers or whatever. But that's, that's on them. That's their thing. But as soon as they hear something I say I disagree with, they have to leave a comment. They can't take the 99% positive or the 80% positive or even the 75% positive, and they have to focus on the 20% negative, 25% negative. I got my percentages wrong. And so, that's how people are. People are like that in relationships. They're, really compatible with somebody, but they only focus on the flaws, the few flaws or the things that they disagree with in the other person. They Seinfeld their way out of a good relationship by focusing on some minute type of specific issue the person has. And they just dwell on it until you can no longer be with the person. So the people who control the system are just the worst versions. They're people, they're ordinary, sucky people who have power and have, responsibility. And they're just, selfish in nature. But they're just steroided versions of the average sucky person. So it's human beings that suck, and we can't change anybody else. Like we can't change. We can influence other people. People can learn from you, or you can, there's this energetic flow between people, right? If you have a higher level consciousness and people come around you, some of them will tune into your consciousness and they'll raise up to higher levels, right? But most of them won't, or at least they won't do it on a conscious level. The heartfulness system is about having somebody who's reached the goal of human life, the spiritual goal, merged in the absolute, transmit their energy back from the source so you can experience that, and that you will strive to reach that same goal yourself, that you'll be pulled up. Like most people are pulling you down. Like most people in life are just pulling each other down. It's like they're all drowning and they're grabbing onto other people and dragging them down with them. That's, most people are heading to the bottom of the ocean. They're heading into the abyss, and the ocean being, something bad in this, this metaphor, and dragging you down to the bottom of the abyss, right? People aren't even able to tread water, and they're drowning each other. And you have to sort of learn to tread water first before you can start pulling other people up and saving them. You have to elevate yourself out of the water itself, and then maybe you're on a solid surface and you can start pulling people up if they are cooperative. But oftentimes you're trying to pull them up and they're trying to drag you back into the abyss with them. And so this is what's happened. I've talked about that decision that was made 2 or 3 generations ago when your ancestors left the farm. They left the hard work of the farm, tribal, whatever situation people are in, village-based situations, over the last 3, 4, 5 generations. And they moved to the city. And they became dependent on money and the economic system and all the things. And when your ancestors did that, they guaranteed the outcome we have now, because we don't have the skills, we don't have the ability to say F you to the people who control the system, and we really don't want to. Again, I've lived on a homestead now, 2 homesteads, and, growing food and milking cows and, doing these different things. And, it's difficult. I like doing it. I enjoy doing it, but have never been able to have the ability to do it 100%, not even close. And so, there's nothing any specific work that I didn't really love to do, right? There's some things that were a little bit harder than others. But in terms of the work itself, not one thing was specifically bad or, horrible. Like some things weren't, as fun or as, interesting. But it's the fact that you have to do it every day and you're doing 20 to 30 other things just to survive. Whereas now you do one specialized skill and you get money, everything else is done for you. And that is something that's way less hard. It might not be better in the grand scheme of things, but it's a lot easier and it's a lot more enjoyable, and you have a lot more free time to do what you want and things like this, even in your, slave job. And so that's why people left the farm, because it was more difficult. Plus they were encouraged based on the economic situation, and it was just a movement that was going to happen. But when that happened, it guaranteed that people would end up getting weaker and weaker, more dependent on technology, stupider and stupider, and just less evolved. And the debt-based economy that was fueling this movement was an illusion. It was never something that was sustainable. And people were just going to consume more and more and pollute more and more. And their character qualities would become more, addicted to things, and the weaknesses would emerge. This is why it's a failed experiment, because sometimes, most times going to the thing that's easiest is going to the situation that's going to turn you into a worse version of yourself and make you weaker and weaker. It was going away from God's will, or at least in terms of divine system, it was going against the natural order of things in many ways. And so now we're at this place where we're no longer natural human beings. We have horrible character qualities. We have all these weaknesses and addictions, and the system we're 100% dependent on is collapsing. And so this situation was predictable, right? This is, not happened. This isn't like this is the first time this has happened, on this planet and other planets. This happened over and over again. This is something that creatures that have higher level of intelligence, right, and have the ability to choose things and can develop technology, and can develop, whatever we've been able to do here, will oftentimes go against the natural order of things, forget about God, disconnect themselves from God. I've talked about this before. When you're miserable, that's when you go to God. Oh, God, please help me. When something's life-threatening, or, you have a tragedy, or, you lose your job, or, you're fearful of something, your life is in chaos, you're just upset, then you run to God and pray, right? When things are going great, you're enjoying, you don't bring God into that, right? You don't say, oh, God, please enjoy this with me. You don't think about God when you're indulging in things. Those are the pleasures are yours, and the pain you give back to God, the suffering you give back to God. You enjoy the good things and you leave God out of that. But when you're feeling bad, you bring God into it. And so that's how people are, right? That's the, human nature. Lots of ways humans are just completely, ass backwards. I mean, if you treat any other human being the way that you treat God, the way that people treat God, is that when you're indulging, you don't say, hey, God, come along and enjoy this with me. Hey, God, let's enjoy this together. Let's do this together. This is fun. I want you to be a part of it. I'm enjoying this. I want you to enjoy it, right? Oftentimes, what you're doing is wrong, so you don't even want God there, right? You don't even think about God. You're just thinking about your enjoyment and how good things are going, right? But then, or you say all praises to God, like God, God's responsible for giving me this, and maybe a little bit of gratitude there, but really it's more that you're saying that you got it from God, so therefore you have the right to indulge in it. I mean, that's more what that means. But then as soon as things go bad, you run to him and dump all your problems on him and want him to fix them, right? I mean, imagine if anybody treated you that way, And so instead of being grateful and, seeing how you could serve God, and grateful for the opportunity to be in life, and, and instead of turning on God and getting mad, or praying to God to solve your problems, when things go south, being appreciative, and then when you're indulging in things, or you're, enjoying things, you bring God along, and you bask in the gratitude, and you have this internalized relationship where you're, bringing God along as somebody that you want to have enjoy the good things, right? You want to have God, feel the expression of your gratitude and your love all the time, that you're, sending back to God. Like who would you rather be around? Like if you were God, what's the type of person you would rather have? A grateful person, or a crappy person that only runs to you when they need something. And so the true woke person, the true awakened person, the true conscious person that's evolving in their ability to understand the true nature of human life, and their personal true nature, and the purpose they're here for, your own personal purpose and everybody's collective purpose in terms of divinity and spirituality and connecting to God and advancing, on a spiritual level. What your soul purpose is that you realize that it's not about changing the system. It's not about changing the controllers. It's not about changing your, family and friends. It's not about any of these things, right? Because it's, that's not your job. It's like you can help people or you can influence them by going in the right direction yourself. You can be an example to them. But you can't just mansplain things to them and expect them to change their internal reality. I mean, the people that are floundering or that you see going in the wrong direction, I mean, everybody's got to, like in a sense, pull themselves up by their spiritual bootstraps and realize that the system is crapping out for so many reasons. Like I give the reasons all the time here. I gave a number of them in this video. But you sense it, right? At some point you realize the system is, devolving right in front of you. It's just imploding on every possible level. It's taking people in the wrong direction. And, that direction is away from your soul's purpose and God. And so you have one, real task, which is to get back on the right track yourself, to figure out where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do, what your gift is to, serve humanity and serve God. Really, serving God is the important part. You serve humanity through serving God. You connect to God and you have an internalized relationship. I talk about the heartfulness system. That is what the system does. It helps people find their spiritual path, find their soul's purpose, and work towards the connecting with God, right? And it provides the, the enhanced energy and the cleaning process, the transmission and the cleaning process. The transmission helps you. It strengthens your ability to connect to God on a deeper level internally. And the cleaning process removes things that are blocking this ability. But you have to do that work, right? You have to, work toward cultivating this relationship with God, developing your heart as an instrument to connect to God, because that's, also essential. Keeping your heart clean and, understanding your heart and the feeling nature, the deeper feeling nature of your heart, and how that is, how God can communicate to you through this heart-based connection, this love connection, right? Just like when you love somebody else, when somebody who loves somebody else, they know that person more than somebody that doesn't, or somebody who just likes them, or even, other family members. You understand and see people through love, and you know them on a deeper level. It's the same thing with God, and your love center is in your heart, right? So all these things is what the heartfulness system does to help people, but there has to be, work being done, right? Like you have to, embrace your side of the problem. You have to embrace your responsibilities in this relationship. And so when you see it that way, politics and the way the country is going and the controllers and, the people that you don't like and the people that you see on the oppositional group and the people that you're thinking to blame for all this and the people that just won't listen to you, your loved ones and other people that just don't get it, right? Why don't they get it? I mean, that's, all those things cease to be important. All those things are not your responsibility because you have to work on changing yourself. And that's, the ultimate expression of being woke, that you're responsible for developing yourself in some positive way, not by beating yourself up or feeling guilt and shame or blaming yourself for all the world's problems, but just understanding your own, character flaws and your own weaknesses and, your own limitations and things like this, but not dwelling on them in a way that you're, constantly beating yourself up or, thinking about what a piece of crap you are, nothing like that, right? Just, understanding that you're a flawed part of this problem, the problem of human creation. You have your own issues and things you have to go through, and that you have to change and develop and evolve as a person. For yourself, your problem is you. Like each person, their problem is themselves, right? Like you're here to solve that equation. You're not here to make the world be the way that you think it is, or, fix everything or save the planet, all these kind of things, right? Your problem is you. You come here with issues that have to be resolved. You come here with tasks that have to be completed on a soul level. Each one of us has those things. You have to make changes, become better, make the world a better place because you're better. Like, make the world a better place by becoming a better person. And so the energy that you're exuding and the, vibrations you're exuding and all the things that you're doing as a human being are raising the quality of life on the planet Earth. Instead of selfishly bringing everything down with your negativity and anger and all these negative things that people indulge in, right? Negative qualities, hateful thoughts, and all these things that people indulge in that only bring the planet down. Because you're going in a downward direction and you're indulging in negative vibrations, negative energy, negative thoughts, all these things. And you're just bringing people down around you, and you're just, another drowning person grabbing onto other people trying to stay afloat. Whereas you can be somebody who's elevating themselves and helping you raise the consciousness and the vibrations of the human species. And so at some point, you can't spend all your time just dwelling on the negative, dwelling on the so-called elite or whatever, the other people, and just reading all this stuff. I mean, you have to, participate in the solution in some way. Do things that are inspirational to you. Do things that are, positive in nature, where you're actually, helping to, move something forward because you have, good things in your life. You're not just, focused all your time talking and thinking about the controllers and, all these negative things, the people that suck and all the rest of it. Then you're just part of the problem. Only spirituality could save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.